It was one of those evenings where the cold seemed to creep into your bones, no matter how many layers you wore. Claire pulled her thin coat tighter around her as she hurried down the street, her worn-out boots clicking against the pavement. The city lights flickered above her, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. But her mind wasn't on the glow of the street lamps or the bustling noise of passing cars. She was thinking about her son, Liam, waiting for her at home, probably hungry. She had just left her second job of the day, a cleaning shift at a small diner, and her pockets felt as empty as her stomach. Rent was due in a few days, and the grocery list in her head was longer than the money in her bank account. Every single dollar mattered, and she had exactly 32 of them left to get through the week. It wasn't much, but she had planned it out. A little bit for bread and eggs, something cheap, but filling for dinner, and maybe, just maybe, a small treat for Liam if she found something on sale. As she neared the bus stop, she noticed a man sitting on the curb. He looked exhausted, his head hanging low, his clothes wrinkled and stained with the kind of wear that didn't come from just a long day. It came from weeks, maybe months, of struggling. His hands were shaking slightly, whether from the cold or something else, she wasn't sure. As she passed, he looked up at her, his eyes hollow but desperate. "Ma'am," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't mean to bother you, but I haven't eaten in 2 days. If you could spare anything, I'd be grateful." Claire stopped. She shouldn't have. She should have kept walking, ignored him, minded her own business. She didn't have enough for herself and Liam, let alone a stranger. But something about the way he looked at her, like he wasn't just hungry, but lost, made her pause. She glanced down at her hand, where she still held the crumpled bills from her shift. $32. It wasn't enough to be generous. It wasn't enough to help anyone. And yet, before she could stop herself, she reached out and placed the money in his palm. "Get yourself something warm to eat," she said quickly, before she could change her mind. The man's eyes widened, and for a second, he just stared at her. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice thick with disbelief. No, she wasn't sure. Not even a little, but she nodded anyway. "Yeah, thank you," he whispered, his fingers tightening around the bills, as if afraid they might disappear. Claire gave him a small, tight smile before turning away, her stomach twisting with a mix of regret and something else she couldn't name. She had just given away her last bit of money, and now she had nothing. How was she going to buy food for Liam? How was she going to make it through the week? As she walked home, the weight of what she had done settled heavily on her shoulders. She told herself she had done the right thing, but right didn't always mean easy. That night, she sat across from Liam at their tiny kitchen table, forcing a smile as she placed a single piece of toast in front of him. It wasn't enough, and she hated that. Liam, only 6 years old, noticed everything. "Mom, aren't you eating?" he asked, his big, innocent eyes filled with concern. "I already ate at work," she lied, ruffling his hair. "You eat up, okay?" He hesitated, then nodded, taking a bite. She watched him chew, the guilt gnawing at her. She had no idea how she was going to fix this. The next few days were the hardest she had faced in a long time. She scraped together meals from whatever was left in their cabinets, skipped lunches at work, and tried to stretch every ounce of food they had. But by the end of the week, things were looking grim. Then, something strange happened. One evening, as she unlocked the front door, she noticed a small package sitting on their doorstep. No note, no markings, just a plain brown box. Frowning, she picked it up and carried it inside. Liam sat on the floor, playing with his only toy, a small stuffed bear that had seen better days. But he perked up when he saw the package. Is that for me? He asked eagerly. Claire hesitated. I don't know, sweetheart. Let's see. Carefully she opened the box, and what she saw inside made her breath catch in her throat. Nestled in the package was a brand new winter coat, warm and thick, far nicer than anything she could have ever afforded, and beneath it, a stack of crisp bills, neatly bundled together. Her hands trembled as she lifted the money. There had to be at least a few $100s here. Maybe more. Liam clapped his hands. Mom, look, a new coat. It's so soft. Claire could barely hear him. Her mind was racing. Who had left this? Why? And then suddenly, she remembered the man on the street, the one she had given her last money to. Could it be? She didn't know. But one thing was certain. Her life had just changed in a way she never expected. Claire sat at the kitchen table, the bundle of crisp bills still in her hands. Her fingers trembled as she counted them. $100, $200, $500. More money than she had seen in months. More than enough to buy groceries, pay rent, and maybe even breathe a little for the first time in a long while. But where had it come from? She glanced at Liam, who was already wrapping himself in the new winter coat. His little face lighting up with pure joy. It fit him perfectly, as if whoever sent it had known exactly what size he needed. That thought made her uneasy. Someone had been watching. Someone had known about her struggle. The memory of the man on the street flickered in her mind. Could it be him? It didn't make sense. She had given him her last $32. And now, this? What kind of person repaid a stranger's kindness like this? Doubt gnawed at her. What if there was a catch? What if this money wasn't a gift, but something else, something dangerous? Claire had spent her whole life knowing that nothing ever came for free. There was always a price. She stared at the box, hoping for a note, a name, anything. But there was nothing, just the money, just the coat. That night, she barely slept. Every sound outside made her tense up, wondering if someone was lurking, watching. Was this kindness, or was it a trap? The next morning, she tucked the money away in the safest place she could think of, the bottom of an old shoebox in her closet, until she figured out where it had come from. She wasn't going to spend a single dollar of it, but reality didn't give her much time to think. Rent was due, and her fridge was nearly empty. Her boss at the diner had cut her hours again, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could stretch what little she had left. A week passed, and the questions still haunted her. Every time she walked home, she found herself looking around, searching for the man she had helped, but she never saw him again. And then, something even stranger happened. One evening, as she and Liam were leaving the grocery store, where she had spent her last few coins on a loaf of bread and a carton of milk, she noticed a man standing by the parking lot. He was dressed in clean, expensive clothes, but something about his face made her stop. His eyes. She recognized them. It was him, the man she had given her money to. But he didn't look lost or hungry anymore. He looked different, stronger, confident. And when his eyes met hers, a knowing smile crossed his face. Claire's heart pounded. Was this a coincidence? Had he followed her? Before she could react, he took a step forward. Wait, he said. His voice was calm, but there was something in it, something that sent a shiver down her spine. She grabbed Liam's hand instinctively, ready to run if she had to. Who are you? She asked, keeping her voice steady. The man hesitated, then sighed. My name is Daniel, he said finally, and I owe you more than you realize. Claire frowned. I don't understand. He glanced down, as if choosing his words carefully. The night you helped me, I was at my lowest. I had lost everything. My job, my home. I hadn't eaten in days. And then you came along and gave me your last bit of money. Without hesitation, he looked back up at her, his expression unreadable. That changed everything for me. That $32. It wasn't just money, it was hope. It reminded me that there were still good people in the world. And because of that, I found the strength to turn my life around. Claire listened, her breath shallow. This still didn't explain the money. But the package, the coat, that was you, wasn't it? Daniel nodded. Yes. I wanted to give back what you gave me, and more. You helped me when no one else would. Now I want to do the same for you. Her stomach twisted. It should have been a relief, but instead, it made her uneasy. Why? She whispered. Daniel smiled faintly. Because I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to feel invisible. And I know what it's like to wonder if you'll make it another day. He paused, then said, I don't want you and your son to feel that way anymore. For a long moment, Claire didn't know what to say. This was too much, too sudden, too unreal. I can't take this, she finally said, shaking her head. I appreciate it, but I don't even know you. Daniel's expression didn't change. I understand, but just know this. I'm not asking for anything in return. I just wanted you to know that your kindness changed my life, and I wanted to make sure you and your son had a little less to worry about. With that, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He held it out to her. She didn't take it. What is it? A job offer, he said simply, at a company I just started working for. It's not glamorous, but it pays well, and I think you'd be good at it. Claire's heart pounded. A job, a real one? The kind that might actually help her escape this endless cycle of struggle. Her fingers itched to take the envelope, but she hesitated. Could she trust him? Was this real? Liam tugged on her sleeve, looking up at her with wide, hopeful eyes. Mom, maybe we should try. And that was when she knew. Maybe life had finally decided to give her a break. Maybe, just maybe, kindness really did come back around. Claire stood frozen, staring at the envelope in Daniel's hand. A job, a chance, something she had prayed for, but never expected to come in such an unexpected way. Her mind was spinning. A part of her still wanted to say no, to walk away, to cling to the safety of not relying on anyone. She had spent years doing everything on her own, learning not to expect kindness from strangers. But wasn't that exactly what had changed? Everything? A single act of kindness. She reached out slowly and took the envelope, her fingers trembling slightly. Daniel gave her a small nod, as if he understood exactly how much this moment meant. That night, Claire sat at the kitchen table, long after Liam had gone to bed, staring at the job offer inside the envelope. It was a position at a small company, receptionist role, steady pay, and most importantly, benefits. A real shot at stability, but doubt still lingered in her mind. Was this too good to be true? What if it didn't work out? She looked toward Liam's bedroom door, hearing his soft breathing from inside. This wasn't just about her anymore. She had to try. The next morning, Claire made the call. She scheduled an interview, her heart pounding, as she wrote down the details. When the day arrived, she borrowed a blouse from her neighbor, did her hair as best as she could, and walked into that office, determined to change her life. The interview wasn't easy. She hadn't had a real job, outside of cleaning and waitressing in years. But she was honest. She told them about her work ethic, about raising Liam alone, about the struggles she had faced, and for the first time, someone listened. A week later, she got the call. She had the job. Tears filled her eyes as she hung up the phone, covering her mouth with her hand. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. She went to the diner the next day and handed in her notice. The manager barely looked up, mumbled something about how they'd find someone else. For the first time in a long time, Claire didn't feel disposable. She felt free. Her first paycheck came 2 weeks later. It wasn't much, but it was enough to cover rent and buy real groceries. Enough to let her pick up a small toy for Liam just because she wanted to. One evening, as she and Liam sat on the couch watching TV, she felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't counting every dollar in her head, wasn't dreading the next bill. Then, there was a knock at the door. When she opened it, Daniel stood there, hands in his pockets, a small smile on his face. "How's the job?" he asked. Claire smiled back. "It's good. Really good." Daniel nodded, as if he had known all along that she could do this. "You never told me," Claire said after a moment. "Where did that money come from? The coat, the package. How did you turn everything around so fast?" Daniel's smile faded slightly. "Let's just say, I wasn't always as down as I was that night you found me. I had a business once. It failed. I lost everything. But when you helped me, it reminded me that I wasn't done yet. I reached out to some old contacts, pulled myself back up, and once, I was back on my feet. I wanted to do the same for someone else." Claire stared at him, her chest tightening. "You didn't have to do all this for me." Daniel shrugged. "Maybe not. But I wanted to. You didn't hesitate to help me when I needed it. I just wanted to make sure you got that same kindness back." Claire didn't know what to say. She had spent years believing the world was cruel, that no one would ever help her unless they wanted something in return. But maybe she had been wrong. Maybe kindness had a way of coming full circle. As Daniel turned to leave, Liam peeked around the doorway and waved. "Thanks for my coat," he called out. Daniel chuckled. "You're welcome, kiddo." Claire watched him walk away, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. Hope, and for the first time in years, she truly believed that everything was going to be okay.